Okay, class. Good evening. So now, let's discuss our another topic on a contract of sale. So, but although since ang pinag-uusapan dito is contract of sale, so kasali siya. So here our topic, Republic Act number 6552 or the Maceda Law. So what is Maceda Law? So here, the law is known as the Realty Installment Buyers Act. So its objective is to protect buyers of real estate on installment payments against onerous and oppressive conditions. So take note, class. So Maceda law applies only to protect the buyers. So take note of that. Buyers where the buyer buy a real estate. So ibig sabihin ng real estate, lupa. So Maceda law covers sale or financing of real property on installments including residential condominium apartments. So when you say real property, class, either land or building. So in building, so that is condominium apartments. However, Maceda law does not include. So take note, class, ito yung mga hindi saklaw ng Maceda law. Number 1, industrial lots. Number 2, commercial buildings. And number 3, sale to tenants under Republic Act number 3844 as amended by Republic Act 6389 or the Land Reform Law. So be on your mind, class, that Maceda law only applies to real property on installment and residential condominium apartments. So exemption nito is yung industrial lots, commercial buildings, at saka yung under sa land reform law. So unlike recto law, sa recto law provides remedies to the part of the vendor, while Maceda law provides remedies on the part of the buyer. So sa recto law, class, ang pinag-usapan doon is personal property, which is remedies on the part ng seller or vendor. While here in Maceda law, remedies on the part of the buyer, which is on real property and condominium apartments. So remedies of the vendee under Maceda law. So these are the remedy. Number 1, grace period. Number 2, cash surrender value. So there must be a cancellation of the contract. Then number 3, additional rights of the buyer. So first, the buyer shall have the right during the grace period before the cancellation of the contract. So number 1, to sell his right to another by notarial act. So take note, class, sa number 3, letter A, ang pinag-usapan dito is during grace period. Kapag binigyan ng grace period si buyer, so si buyer, number one rights niya is to sell his right to another by notarial act. So ipapa-assume niya ngayon sa ibang tao. Number 2, to assign his rights to another by notarial act. So sa number 1, class, ebebenta niya. Naintindihan? Ibig sabihin, the property will makukuha na ngayon ng bagong buyer. Here sa number 2, class, assignment of rights lang yung nangyari. Ibig sabihin, si original buyer pa rin yung may-ari ng property. So it's just only assignment of his rights. Number 3, to reinstate the contract by updating the account. So another rights of the buyer during grace period is to reinstate the contract by updating the account. Ibig sabihin, parang i-refresh nyo lang yung kontrata nyo. So kapag may unpaid or merong unpaid installments or arrears, so i-update nyo lang yon. Parang reconstruction yung mangyayari. Reconstruction of debt. So next, to pay an advance by installment or the full unpaid balance anytime without interest. So one of the rights din ng buyer is pwede niyang bayaran in full. So without interest. Letter C, to ask for the annotation of the full payment of the purchase price in the certificate of title covering the property. So, one also of the rights of the buyer, kapag na-fully paid niya na yung property, so he can demand for the annotation of the certificate of title. So, covering the property. So, next, so let's discuss one by one. What is grace period? So, if the installment paid is less than 2 years, so the buyer will be given a 60 days to pay. So, yan yung sinasabi sa grace period. So, take note class, in a grace period, walang cancellation ng contract. Naintindihan? So, walang cancellation ng contract. Kapag less than 2 years yung nabayaran na ngayon ni buyer, so, the buyer will be given a 60 days to pay, or that will be the grace period. Next, if the installment paid is more than 2 years, so the buyer will be given a 1 month for every year of installments paid. So, kapag above 2 years na ngayon yung nabayad ni buyer, so, every year, equivalent to 1 month grace period. So, let's have an example. So, installment paid, 5 years. So, kapag ang nabayaran na ngayon ni buyer is 5 years, so, compute for the grace period. That is 5 months. So, take note class ha. So, dito siya ma-fall. So, if the installment paid is more than 2 years, this is the rule. Kapag more than 2 years, si buyer is mabibigyan na ngayon ng 1 month for every year of installment. So, sa ating example, since 5 years na ngayon yung naibayad ni buyer, so, yung grace period is 5 months. Another example, how about installment paid? 10 years. So, the grace period will be 10 months. So, as simple as that. Next, the right shall be exercised by the buyer only once in every 5 years of life of the contract and its extension if any. So, ang sabi daw dito class, kapag yung original contract is yung grace period, you can avail only every 5 years. Next, cash surrender value. So, how to compute what is cash surrender value? So, let's have this. This is the rule. So, installment paid 2 to 5 years. So, here in cash surrender value class, ang ginawa ni seller is kinancel niya ngayon yung kontrata. Unlike dun sa grace period, walang cancellation ng contract na nangyari. Here in cash surrender value, there are cancellation of contract. But take note class, pwede ka lang mag-cancel ng contract kapag nag-default na si buyer ng 2 installments payment, 2 or more installment payment. So, this is the rule in computation of cash surrender value. So, installment paid if minimum of 2 years at saka maximum of 5 years. So, 50% of the total installments paid. So, yan yung magiging cash surrender value. And then, take note class, here, installments paid. Kapag below 2 years, the buyer cannot avail cash surrender value. So, yun yung, let's say for example, yung naibayad pa lang ni buyer is 1.5 year or 1 year plus 6 months. And then, nag-default siya ngayon ng 3 installment payment. And then, ang ginawa ni seller, kinancel yung kontrata. So, si buyer, wala siyang matatanggap na cash surrender value. So, what if more than 5 years? So, more than 5 years na ngayon yung naibayad ni buyer. So, the rule will be 50%. So, just like here, 50% plus 5% every year after 5 years. So, that is the rule. So, but do not exceed 90% of the total payments. So, this will be the rule class ha. So, let's have an example. Installments paid 7 years. So, saan siya pumasok? So, minimum of 2 years and maximum of 5 years. So, compute for the cash surrender value or the percentage rather. So, 50% for the 5 years. Naintindihan? So, minimum ito. Next, how about for the 6th year, another 5%. For the 7th year, another 5%. And the total will be 60%. So let's say for example, ang total na naibayad ni buyer is 1 million. So 1 million multiplied by 60%, so the cash surrender value is 600,000. So the 600,000 will be given by the seller to the buyer. So as a sort of cash surrender value. Another example, B bought from S Realty a residential house and lot for 600,000. So the terms of the contract provided the following: down payment of 60,000 and the balance will be payable in 15 years in installment of 3,000 per month. So after paying the down payment and 84 monthly installments, B defaulted in the payment of the 85th and the succeeding installments. As a consequence, S Realty or the seller canceled the sale. So take note class ha, ito yung crucial dito. Dapat to avail for the cash surrender value, dapat may mangyayaring cancellation ng sale. And then, the requirements also for the cancellation of sale, dapat nag-default si buyer ng 2 or more installment payments. So, the question, how much cash surrender value is B entitled to receive? So, magkano na ngayon yung matatanggap ni B as a cash surrender value? So, here are the solution. First, let's compute first how many years does B, kung ilang years nagbayad si B. So, the 84 months divided by 12 months, so equals to 7 years. 7 years nang nagbabayad si B. Next, so compute for the percentage of cash surrender value. For the first 5 years, that is 50%. Next, for the 6th year, 5%. Next, for the 7th year, another 5%. So the total will be 60%. Now, let's compute for the total cash surrender value. 60% multiplied by the 60,000, which is the down payment, add plus the 84 months na 3,000. So, kindly get your calculator and compute. So, the total cash surrender value will be 187,200. So, ito ngayon yung matatanggap ni B as a sort of cash surrender value. So, take note class ha, in availing for cash surrender value, dapat ma-meet mo yung requirements. Unang-una, nakapagbayad ka ng minimum of 2 years. Take note of that. So, nakapagbayad ka ng minimum of 2 years. Lampas ka ng 2 years. Kasi kapag below ng 2 years, walang cash surrender value. Next, requirements to avail for the cash surrender value, there must be a cancellation of the contract. So, crucial yon na requirements. Next, how to avail for the cancellation of contract. So, kapag walang cancellation of contract, walang cash surrender value na mangyayari. It's just only a grace period. So, kapag may cancellation of contract na, so the requirements for cancellation of contract, 2 or more monthly installments defaulted by the buyer. So, kapag ganon, pwede nang i-cancel yung contract of sale. And then, the last requirement, dapat, in computation of cash surrender value, if more than 5 years, so the first 5 years, that will be equals to 50%. And then, the succeeding year will be 5% every year of payments, but not exceeding 90%. So, take note of that.